Hello and greetings. How are you? How's your Sunday? Today is Sunday. We're almost out of Mercury retrograde. I know from watching others and from my own experience, I see Mercury retrograde as like retrospect. And sometimes it's like an inadvertent break. We say that, it can be frustrating when your computer, mechanical things start to break. And also, one of my moms says that's a breakthrough when things break, but it's still really frustrating. And and also that we actually, sometimes when those things stop working, then also so do we have to, right? Or we get a chance to focus on something else. So, and then in the year of 2020, it's going to be extremely intense because we're already looking at a year of 2020 vision, 2020 seeing things, right? So I wanted to a little bit continue with the natural witches scenario and even that word. So I like words and to go into words and actually find out the roots of things. And when we speak of witches, so I've learned a lot in all of this studying of the goddess. And one of the words is hag. Hag is an old word for snake and also of like a woman, okay? And it used to not have the condescending meaning that it now has today. And there are stories of a hag that used to fly around with a knapsack full of gifts and deliver them around what we now call Christmas time. So it was like a female deity or a female being that used to fly around and give gifts to children. But of course, now we hear stories of like the witch who flies around and kills and eats children. So what I'm really also seeing is the intentional fear behind things. So even the word witch, like what comes with that, and the old sayings of like witch hunters. I'm recognizing a lot of, I've already seen, and not that I encourage this for people because of all of the energies in it. One of the books I shared in the other video was the Encyclopedia of Spirits. And also through my own research, a lot of the demons or daemons either were or are female and have a lot of actually healing qualities and knowledge to offer. And I'm just really recognizing that so many things have been taught to us backwards. Okay, so the name witch, bitch, these things, they sound familiar. Bitch goes back to a female dog, and the Anubis energy and Put energy is a female dog. Remus and Romulus raised by a female dog, even though those twins were female. The original twins. Everything was originally female. And so what better way to interrupt everything than to confuse us with, I actually think it's male fear of the female power. And that, and we say power, I think it is a perspective from a male perspective to see the females having power, which is basically giving life. I think. I don't know. That's my guess. Because, and the natural witch part. All right. So one of the things I feel that I really figured out about the circle, the true meaning of one. Oh, I have it. Hold on. Okay, I always do this. I kind of go all over the place. Witch. These words, so even the word broad, I think, were originally positive words that were not derogatory. And when I was speaking about the daemons, or demons as they're called, I think there's a link to this. I think the whole, serpent slithering on her belly, by the second, apparently, God, because there were gods that created the man and the woman, and it was good. And it literally says the gods created us in their image. It is plural. There is not just one God. And however you believe, you know what I'm saying? It's like we're like led astray through certain truths in religion. And that's the thing. Like, I actually think that a lot of things are mistaught. And that might be part of the natural witchy thing. Okay. So that's really where I wanted to go back to. So some of the other things are like the elements respond to you, say like water or air, or you've always naturally wanted to hug a tree. And then the energy of getting certain messages. So, for example, in a Reiki practice, and always feeling like you're connected to something, like the planet, actually, or you can feel the planet. That might be a natural witch, warlock. Oh, and that, to me, it's not negative, because magi, magicians, miracle even means magic. I think magic, spirituality became intermixed, and or the word magic came from the magi or the magician, and the magician became the priest and was able to manipulate these energies into either like dark and scary forces rather than, the circle of removing certain energetic parts, right? So the one and the circle relate to the female and how we let go of energies to create a whole nother form of one, or the circle. And I was looking through like mathematics and how it goes, and I actually thought that trigonometry was after calculus, but calculus is like the highest form of mathematics, right? But I don't think they ever teach that the real number is 0 and that 0 doesn't exist, because you wouldn't have to go through all those classes. You wouldn't have to pay for all those classes. Education should be free. I mean, I believe in exchange, but I think education should be free. And I think that that's wise. I think it was George Carlin who said it, or somebody recently quoted this person saying, if they let you do it, you might want to question why. Which brings me to a whole nother topic that I actually have been wanting to speak about in relation to us being mistaught. So a little bit about being a natural witch and then a little bit about some other stuff. So we have this issue at the border, and I don't know if people, issue is a kind word. We have this horrendous problem at the border of California and Mexico going on, where we have a large amount of people wanting to come into the United States seeking asylum. And some of the stories that they are telling is that they are being literally like pushed out of their homes in the middle of the night. And a lot of them, from what I understand, are Ecuadorian and from further down into that part of South America, and aren't predominantly Mexican, but of course they're Spanish speaking, right? And similar to here, like if you're not aware of this, similar to here, where I obviously have a West Coast quote unquote accent, and you go to New York and you have the New York coffee Shua accent. It's similar to South America. They're not all going to sound the same. They're not all going to speak exactly the same Spanish. And, you know, I don't know. Anyways, I'm not sure if people are aware of that, but it's similar, just in case they're not. So this links into us and people like those I've mentioned before who are helping us remember who we are, which is basically Indigenous Americans. We're not from Africa. And we are told the story as to why the Europeans and the Spanish came here for gold, that they never found, right? Isn't that the story? They never found it. That's how slaves happened. I guess they couldn't find gold, so they used people instead. And genocided them, hoping to find the gold. And what gold they did find was like California, Alaska, and they did the same thing, right? They genocided the people there to get the gold or move them around and all that crap. So I personally think that because we're starting to figure out what's going on, I think this is a second expedition into the gold part of South America. And why aren't the American people or people around the world wondering why there is a higher number of immigrants seeking asylum? This is which brings me to another statement. I'm going to say, I know, like the MAGA is that? Am I even saying Make America Great Again? MAGA people, which is like MAGA. Just saying, you're kind of inadvertently inviting mother back. Thank you. You want to make America great again? Give the Indians back their land. America was great when the land was with the people who it belonged to in the first place. It's the indigenous peoples. They took care of the land. They took care of their peoples. They didn't leave a footprint. They didn't build dams. They didn't kill things for no reason. Everything was venerated. You're not? You want to make America great again? Work towards giving the land back to the indigenous peoples. Work towards bringing the truth back. Work towards actually, taking care of the land and the peoples. Because I have been thinking for months, when was America great? Oh, probably in the time we didn't know it, when the Indians were living here, off the land, in peace with nature. And there were plenty of wild animals and land and abundance. I think we're immortal. I think this mathematics is immortality. And I think everything that's taught to us is taught in great lengths to confuse us. Even the word one, right? It starts with a 0, right? It starts with a 0. And then the N could break down into, so you could do 0, which is 1 negative energy. 1 negative energy. And, okay, so I guess this is the masculine, right? So if this is the masculine, I've never been good at these because I think they're both a little confusing. As far as like this, right, the Ankh is the female. That makes more sense. Okay. Yeah, it's basically the Ankh. So I think what happened is in the masculine energy, they taught us that 1 negative is like the masculine, right? The man with the outer part sticking out, which I actually think is somewhat on point because I think it's the part of the female that decided to remove the masculine part of herself. And I actually heard this originally from somebody else, so you know who you are if you're watching. And at first I was like, whoa, I didn't even think of that. But yeah, like we're each other reversed, right? Okay. In the idea of negative being the actual way we're supposed to do it. So we're in a culture where we're taught to think positively. But if we think positively, we're adding stuff on, which teaches us attachment, and it makes it hard to let go of attachment, right? But if you look at things from a circle and you look at things as a negative, you're letting go of something. And also negative is considered the feminine. But if you're letting go of something in a negative way, like minus this energy, and then another minus energy comes in, then you actually create a positive whole, and a positive in a way that is for the whole. As long as we keep thinking linearly and positively, we're actually not in line with the big picture. And it does, I mean, I relate this back to what's happening, because as long as we keep not knowing the truth, they keep telling us truths, we believe it. And I mean, what sense does it make? What sense does it make to leave a country, to come here, to know that you're probably going to end up in some freaking detention facility that is not only so completely inhumane, but also internationally illegal, as far as specifically, it's just illegal. It doesn't make any sense. And why do we talk about we're a great country where everyone can come and find freedom? You know, it's such a backwards thing. So with that, you know, bringing some healing into that idea. And I actually think that this is, the circle idea is a key to however the pyramid was used to kind of like blow up the planet a couple times. And I actually think this is why they keep us locked in this, you know, dumbed down, you know, not actually knowing the complete truth about things, teaching us stuff, making money off of teaching us stuff that isn't going to get us anywhere. It's just going to keep us in the same blocked, you know, mental position. But if we understand that one is this, and go from there, and that this whole number system is bullshit, that our whole education system is bullshit. Speaking of student loans and stuff like that, like, okay, my massage education, yes. But my math education, that's not real. You're not teaching me real education through math. You're not teaching me what they were learning way back when with this, with one. Not teaching that. And I spent 4 years, plus my younger youth years and on my own time, researching African history. All right, I got a story for y'all. I'm going to tell a story. That's what we are, storytellers. So, I'm going to tell you a story. Thanks for listening. It's a little sad and a little weird. So, my adopted parents are from the East Coast. And before I was adopted, and before my brother, who is now, both of my brothers, they had 2 sons, actually. And their first son died very, very young. And I mentioned that because the people who were babysitting, very good friends of our family. Okay, so we're going to shoot to years later. Maintained friends with both my dad, even after my parents split. Maintained friendships with my dad and my mom because they knew them since they were young, right? They're just family. They've known each other. Well, years later, one of those family members marries this guy. And she and my mom is living with them at the same time. This is in Washington. Okay. And just to so we discover that guy that one of our family friends married is related to one of the judges that was at the witch trials many years ago. The famous witch trials with Sarah Goody, Tituba, the slave witch, and I think the other one's name is Elizabeth something. And I was like, that is crazy, right? So also in that, they figure out that my mom, who raised me, is related to Sarah Goody. Okay. They're living in the same house. One is related to the judge. One is related to Sarah Goody. That's no coincidence. Are you kidding me? And I find this okay. So she tells me that years go by, and I was just like, wow, that's so interesting. Years go by, and my dad, he was kind of a wild partier. I've told you a little bit about him. He partied a lot when he was young. And we were always amazed, like, how did he survive? Well, my brother committed suicide. And then about a year later, my dad ends up with cancer. So my theory is that it was a whole guilt thing and just sadness, right? So my dad ends up with cancer, but he doesn't die from cancer. Technically, he dies from a very severe injury to his head. He fell in the garage, supposedly, and cracked his head open. And went into a coma for 55 days, and then he died on July 19th, Tuesday. Okay. So I'm living here with my mom, and we're talking one day about Geronimo, and we're also talking about Sarah Goody. It was the weirdest thing. Like, she tells me about Sarah Goody and how she might be related to her. And then we're having an argument about Geronimo and his brother's name, and I was right. And she couldn't tell me I was right. She's a narcissist. Okay. But she couldn't tell me she was right. I was right. She could not tell me I was right, even after she knew I was right. And I reiterated everything. She was like, well, you said blah. She just could not tell me I was right. And I was like, what is the deal? Why can you not tell me how come you can never tell me I'm right? Like, what the hell? So I go out and I start researching the witch trials. Well, Tituba is there, and Tituba was the first one. So it was Tituba was the first one, or Sarah Goody right at the same time. So the story about Sarah Goody is that she was once very wealthy, and she gets married, and her husband was pretty wealthy, but he ended up getting into some financial trouble. She married the next guy. He also kind of got her into financial trouble. So by this time, when the witch trials are going on, her and her husband are both living on the street, and apparently she had become like this scary witchy type of person. And so somebody turned her in. Tituba, if you don't know, probably a lot of you do know the story, Tituba was turned in for baking a cake for one of her, she was a worker, a servant. So one of her servants' daughter had started her moon, her period, and so she made her a cake to help celebrate this, occasion. And then the other lady, I can't remember why she was in there. So I'm reading the story, and Tituba had basically been forced into admitting that she was a witch. And the story about Sarah Goody was she was pregnant. So she had been convicted as a witch, but they didn't want to kill her while she was pregnant. So they locked her up, and she was in prison and gave birth to her baby, and it died. Okay, so my mom's first baby was very young and died. Okay. Sarah also had a daughter who was also imprisoned. Okay, and this is who my mom's related to, right? Because if she died, how would she be related to her? And she had to testify against her mother, and watched her mother give birth, and watched this child die in front of her mother. And the story is that this young woman gets out years later, but is mentally ill. And my brother that lived and then committed suicide. Right. Okay, so I'm reading this, I'm like, oh, it's a little weird, right? But okay. And yes, the judge is related to the guy my mom used to live with's husband, right? Or the lady's husband, right? And that's all over in there too. That last name, that last name is now this person's first name. Okay. So then also in the story, I think so Tituba is then sold again, I think, through her servant. And so I was telling you, I was saying to my mom, how can you never admit you were right? And before I discovered she was a narcissist, I had read this story. So in this story, which isn't funny, but it's just whoa. And I've always wondered, why was I adopted to this family in particular? And I always think that we're related somehow to people through reincarnation, right? And I've also always felt like I somehow came from California, and I've had dreams where I'm literally speaking Spanish and I totally understand it. When I wake up, I don't remember, right? Okay. So in the Sarah Goody story, they had brought her to trial, and this man, they had accused her of using this knife to try to kill somebody, and this guy does show up, and he's like, it's my knife, it wasn't her. And she's like, see, and even still, how witch crazy they were. So they're like, you're still a witch. And at the trial, she yells at the judge. Oh, and her husband had to testify against her, right? They made her husband testify against her. So she's yelling at the judge and everybody in there, I'm not a witch. I'm no more of a witch than you are a warlock. And if you kill me, God will make you drink your own blood before you die. And then they hung her on a Tuesday, July 19th. I literally dropped whatever I was holding in my hands, because also when my dad hit his head, he drank his own blood, right? This is horrible. This is a horrible story. And it's a horrible story because these things happened, and it's so sad. It's also, what the hell, right? And to me, I'm like, obviously she was a witch. Because here we are, years later, and lifetimes later. And even though, like, I don't know, I feel like something happened with them, with us in that jail. Like, we made a deal, like, we will meet each other in the future and it will be different and we will figure this out. But that's just too many coincidences, don't you think? This man marries a longtime family friend, and he happens to be related to the judge who tried her ancient relative, her great aunt, I think. Well, she's related to the daughter. Be like her great grandmother, maybe. We even argued about that. But what it made me think of is, like, even back then, she couldn't admit. She would not admit to something she did not think was true. Like, in a whole nother lifetime. And I think that she brought in some of that rage and anger because she came in with lung problems and she was hung, right? So I think it is a direct reincarnation of those. And I actually think the Elizabeth lady might actually be related to that family's, because I just do. And I think I was Tituba. Like, weird, right? But I'm brown. They think I'm black, but I'm actually from California, right? Or from this part. And the dreams about Spanish, I don't know. Way out there, but these are like the natural witch things. And just knowing, like, the earth is not going, like, knowing that there's this memory that is out there that we're supposed to remember. And yes. Yeah, I guess really truly what I'm figuring out in all of this is a natural witch is going to figure it out, or she's not. And if she thinks that, or he, or they, however they see themselves, if they're going to pursue that, these kinds of things will show up in their lives. It's just so weird to me. My dad was a lawyer. Like, it's just kind of weird. It's not just weird. It's at a point where it's so weird, it must not be weird. Weird means different or unusual. So it is weird and different and unusual, but I think these things actually are possible. And so I hope that this doesn't it's what happened in my family with my dad was freaking horrible. There are no words to describe, like, the whole thing for me. I still have a lot of emotion around it. I didn't have the greatest relationship with him, but that doesn't mean I don't have any kind of love or wanting peace there. I shared that because it's just too, I think the word is coincidental. Too many synchronicities. So, which is weird. Witchy things. And it makes me think, like, so are we all brought back together so that we can bring some healing to that time? And that's like where the Reiki comes in, and even the understanding of these things. Because also, like, an initiation happened the night my dad hit his head. For me, it was just, all of it's just, I think that these things are more real and less weird than all the other stuff in the world. So, yeah. Okay. And then I want to go in a little different direction before I get off this video. So some of the other things that might ring true as far as like, so I mentioned like the elements, these kinds of things where you look into your history and like, these are way too coincidental for it to not be something here. And also the astrological inadvertent connections. For example, you might get really, really, really sleepy for no reason on like, you know, a Saturday or a work day where you're just so exhausted you can't even figure out what it is. And you rest, and then you find out later that there's some really powerful planetary energies going on. Or that there was an earthquake somewhere, or you might feel an earthquake before it happens, or you can actually communicate with animals in a unique way, like in a really weird way. I think these are hints to natural witches, and if you can do all of those things, I think you were a Sibyl or a priest that used to work with Sibyls, or an ancient prophet, and or a starseed as they're called, right? And yes, one of the messages I got was that there is the feminine is returning, and the masculine, you know, like preachers and popes and ministers and stuff have gotten this message through even their deity, that the female is to be uplifted, and some are following through and some are not. I have found through religion that if it is predominantly masculine led, that they're not going to uplift, say, what I consider a natural witch. I've mostly seen that we've been kind of condemned, pushed aside, and are told to not be listened to. So I think that that's also a big shift that's happening now, is kind of recognizing that that doesn't really even make sense. It's like God condones women being punished and abused and silenced, and I don't think so. I don't agree with that. Love doesn't silence. Creation doesn't, you know, limit. All right, it's a long video. Thanks for watching. Please comment. Let me know if you have any really weird reincarnation type stories or anything that might relate to this, or if there's something else you might want me to dive into. Take care of yourselves, your family, your animals, your land, yourself, and I'll see you next time.